Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the afternoon session of day 2 of the eFrames FICCI 2020. We start with video games, The Road Beyond the Lockdown. To tell us more, I would like to invite the moderator, Mr. Manish Agarwal, Chief Executive Officer of Nazara Technologies. Manish, the panel is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. This is a FICCI Frames gaming session, and I think I have got really great ensemble of people here. Gaming of late, last 4 months, I have really got so many calls about people interested in gaming. I've been in gaming for last over a decade, and the excitement around gaming is really high. Everybody who has not thought about gaming, I think, is not thinking about gaming. And whether it's the investors who think this is the new gold rush. So when we were looking at creating the schedule for these sessions, we said that let's kind of bring in people who are at the thick of the action, who are really seeing that massive amount of upsurge which has happened in the gaming in India. And my fellow panelists have been really kind enough to spare time to kind of really do that. A brief introduction about myself. I'm CEO for Nazara. We are one of the oldest, largest gaming company. Personally, I've spent more than a decade in gaming. Have gone through a variety of roles from running a gaming studio, building a freemium model, to working with ecosystem, investing in ecosystem, and have seen it. A lot of pepper you see on the beard and the hair has come in the last decade. And yeah, that's what it is. A lot of youngsters, they say very kindly, you are a veteran, which means they say, "Budha ho gaye ho." So you've grown old in the system. So that's what they mean. And so they are very kind enough on that. So without much ado, I would like to just open it up to my panelists to introduce themselves, and then we can get on to the discussion. Vikash, let's start with you.
Hello everyone, I'm Vikas Jaiswal, creator of massive hit mobile game Ludo King, and I'm founder and CEO of Newfound Technologies. I want to share here a quote which I read a while back. Find what you love to do, and then find someone to pay you for what you love doing.
Good.
So I'm just doing that and feel blessed. I'm here because games people play. Because at Newfound Technologies, we are about games people play. I was highly passionate of gaming, so one thing led to another, and now it's been 15 years in gaming. That's about me.
Good. Any order, Sharon, then we can move to Dave and Sam.
Thanks, Manish. Hi, everybody. I'm Sharon Luciani. I'm with Google Play, and I lead the games business development for India, Australia, and New Zealand now. I've been in the gaming industry for a very long time. I think upwards of 15 years. I've been working. I narrowly missed a career in finance to test out this interesting industry called the video game industry about 17, 18 years ago, and I've been hooked ever since. I've been in startups. I've been in the MMORPG space, the console space. I was at Xbox for a while, and now I help define and lead game developer and consumer strategy when it comes to certain aspects of gaming in India, Australia, and New Zealand.
Thank you, Sharon. Sam?
Sam Carlisle. I originally started out as a games artist and worked a lot in India. Spent several years at Sumo, and at the Sumo, they have an India art division. I was there at the founding of that. And so I spent time working as an artist there and helping to manage that team. And then moved into external development, which meant working with external partners, not in India, but around the world. I helped develop that side for Sumo India and for Sumo Digital, and then moved on to Xbox, where I help our studios, first-party studios, so the studios that we own. I help all those titles with their external partners across disciplines. I spend my time learning the market, working with production teams, and understanding how better we can work together as external partners.
Respect, Sam, for the artist. I was always amazed with the output which those fingers can produce. Huge respect. Yeah.
I don't know if I can call myself an artist anymore unless doing shading inside Excel documents counts as art.
Dave, over to you.
Absolutely does. Hi guys, I'm Dave Sanderson. I am the External Development Manager at Phoenix Labs, which is a games developer based out of Vancouver in Canada. I started my career in the film industry, spent about a decade on the development side there before moving into games. I'm a bit of an unusual character in this space where I began my career on the service provider side. So I actually did biz dev for a company that specialized in trailers and cinematics for a number of years before moving over to Phoenix Labs, where I handle sort of two pieces. One would be the sort of the strategic partnership side of business development, and the other is just straight external development. So our relationships with various service providers and sort of connecting our games team with external teams to help them achieve their goals. Basically, we want to make the greatness of our game not be limited by capacity, only by our imagination.
Lovely. Capability and capacity go hand in hand. Good, guys. Thank you very much. Really, really exciting. As I said, not just India, globally, we have seen a huge uptick in gaming. And there are two questions which really come for everybody. One is, what's the upsurge? And we have Sharon and we have Vikas. They can really shed a lot of light on the whole surge which India market has seen. And a lot of our listeners, people who are attending this would be interested. And then I would like to have a discussion on how permanent is this upsurge? Is it transient or is it going to be permanent, right? Vikash, I would, since you are the really, you crossed, congratulations on 500 million downloads, which is like really a milestone to savor and cherish for everyone in the ecosystem, not just Game Mission. Congratulations to you and your whole team.
Thank you. Yet we have not crossed the 500 million, but we have crossed 475 million. Very soon we will.
Yeah.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah. Oh, that's really small numbers, right? So Vikash, over to you. How has been last 4 months, and what kind of? I think I would like to, more than numbers, want to focus on the underlying consumer behavior. What have you seen changing? I think that is important for a lot of people to really understand and appreciate. Numbers are numbers, and numbers we can all eat, breathe, sleep. But it's the insights from the consumers is what is important, and that's more permanent.
Yeah. So definitely during the pandemic, the gaming industry has seen a boom and a sudden surge in the number of users and the overall session time spent by these users on daily basis during the lockdown. And this has translated into huge positive growth for our overall gaming business too. One of our game, Ludo King, is played by most Indians during this lockdown. I must say on this platform, the day has come. Indian developed game Ludo King is ruling the top charts on mobile game stores since last 3 years. I want to put some statistics of Ludo King during the lockdown. Our daily players increased from 15 million to 51 million. That is 1.5 crore to 5.1 crore on daily. That is a 3x traffic surge. Average play time changed from 35 minutes to 49 minutes, and revenue grown to 2.5x and higher. This is indeed a proud moment for Indians. We Indians are playing our own game. Specialists who once claimed that gaming was bad are now saying that gaming is an effective way to manage mental health during this lockdown. All of this has definitely led to growth of the gaming industry. That will be all from my side.
Sharon, I would like to ask you, obviously the numbers for people who want to consume numbers, but more importantly, as I said, what are the consumer behaviors you are seeing?
No, that's those are interesting numbers. Give me one more. Sorry, I think my daughter was knocking on the door, so my wife just knocked in to say to ignore that. But I think the numbers, while it's difficult to divulge too much, clearly as you can take what Mr. Vikas shared with growth trends with regards to not just Indian games, but games that have behavior that is fairly easy to adopt and simpler learning curves. And what we've seen in terms of behavioral change makes me suspect that the lockdown has introduced a lot more people to gaming, but also introduced gaming within homes as families. And that's something that I can derive from looking at the way board games where you sort of single device multiplayer has the numbers have jumped rapidly, right? And this is for a great extent without, and some developers that I've spoken to, which I manage, have achieved this without any significant increase in user acquisition spends. So clearly there is a clear shift in behavior, and you could then derive from that that there's a shift in perception of games, right? Once you're locked into a house with a finite number of people for a unknown infinite time, at least that's what it feels like right now. Certain methods of entertainment that were considered that had, especially in India, right, certain terminologies attached to it. This is good, this is bad, go out and play, it's good, don't spend time on your phone, it's bad, things like that. When you are limited with what you can do, I think people have shown that they made a choice to drift towards mobile games, or at least that's what we can assume from the numbers that we see. But that's also affected users across all tiers, right? So you have the clearly what I would call new user behavior, right? And we did a market research a few months ago, which we released. This was just pre-COVID. We did surveys and we reached out to well over 2,500 gamers in India. And they clearly showed certain indications that this behavioral change would happen. One of the things we found was that 46% people who were surveyed, gamers, who had not paid as yet, indicated that they were interested in paying were they to see the right set of circumstances come together in terms of value proposition, in terms of form of payment, in terms of a few other things, depending on what it is that they individually thought was an issue. What we believe we've seen, especially the last few months, a couple of things happened, right? Even pre-COVID on Google Play, we introduced UPI, which is one of the most popular forms of digital payment in India, and hence one of the most popular forms of payment. That combined with what we see with COVID, I suspect has also made spending in game easier for a lot of people. Right? And once you make spending easier, once you get past the initial barrier, which I suspect is what the whole lockdown contributed at, we're likely to see more and more spend, and which is why Mr. Vikas mentioned that he's seen a spike in user spending on a fairly linear game like Ludo, right? Multiplayer, but that's broadly where I'm seeing interesting areas of consumer trend uplift.
So from a perspective, do you see, and the follow-up question which I said for both of you, do you see this behavior of from a no gamer to a casual gamer playing more often? Is that going to continue as we move in next 6 months, 8 months, 9 months? Is it going to go back to India saying that go outside and play and spend less screen time and that whole family thing of playing a Ludo or any other game coming together? Is it going to sustain? Is it a deep habit formed? Or is it just a majburi which has happened and which has led to this spike? Vikas.
Or Mr. Vikas first,
Yeah, Manish, I think it's definitely going to change, especially when things start to go back to normal. However, I don't believe that they will go back to exactly how it was before COVID. But there is going to be a new normal. A lot of people have been introduced to gaming during this lockdown, either by friends or family. People who never considered gaming were now hooked on our on playing games. I believe that once the lockdown ends, they won't just give up on gaming. Some might, some might may not be able to play as often, but an entire new crowd has introduced to new behaviors and habits, which might not be easy to break.
Sharon?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the most interesting thing is I used to love watching TV with my family, right? Television shows, Doordarshan and all of that. I remember people saying, I remember when we moved into television, right? And we had one channel in India, and most of us remember those days. I had a relative who worked on a new TV channel that was coming up. The concept was unheard of. What would you do with more content? Was the question. What would people do with more TV channels? They're already spending all their time in one form of entertainment. And obviously now we can't think of living life any other way. But I love watching television with family even today. And then OTT came about. And I think there is no question that even that behavior, which was less than 15 years old in India, has shifted drastically again. And we don't question whether OTT, watching videos on your apps, Netflix, Hotstar, etc., will ever go away. Once you get a taste of something that is content that is clearly interesting by virtue of itself, right? You may not spend as much time on it post the lockdown, but you're definitely going to find a place in your life where you put it back, where you put it in, right? And that's what I suspect is going to happen.
So I think for me, the message is gaming has brought families together. And I think that is really kind of a very big thing for us as an industry, very nascent industry, very young industry. And if we can play that role, because OTT is always all about your own profiles and individual choices and individual recommendations, while the multiplayer games being played together has really kind of had an opposite effect. So with that, Sam, I will kind of move to you. You heard that India is going through rapid uptake in gaming. You have spent copious amount of time in India in building games and studios and capabilities. What do you think is the ecosystem ready to build a AAA title around Indian theme?
Yes, more or less. So I spent most of my career in the AAA space, so the console AAA game space. And obviously the larger amount of most successful games in India are mobile based. So really my perspective is coming from, is India ready to create console? Does it have the market penetration of consoles and PCs themselves to be able to do it? On the PC side, yes. On the console side, less so. Yeah, but in terms of skill base, we get a huge amount, and David will be saying here, we get a huge amount of our art content and our animation content from India. And in terms of the levels of quality that they hit, they are comparable with everyone else. They can absolutely hit the AAA quality. The areas that lag behind have been around engineering and code, but we've seen a big uptick in small indie developers popping up in India, and that scene actually coalescing into something that is a bit more that is a more of an ecosystem and something that can support itself. Very Unity based, but very strong. So those engineering parts, we're now seeing the gaps are starting to fill. The missing skill sets are starting to come together. So I think it is a matter of time before you actually have your full India development scene. Again, coming from a console and PC rather than a rather than a mobile perspective. I suspect the mobile side of the market is far more mature already than the console is. But yes, those aspects are certainly there.
Dave, your
Building on
views on
what
this?
Yeah, I was going to say, building on what Sam has said, it's interesting to me to hear the Indian market being spoken of as a young one. So the idea of games being relatively earlier on its maturity for gaming. My experience of the Indian market is much more on the service provider side, which from an external development point of view is very mature. In terms of AAA developers or Western developers looking for highly skilled artists in particular, but engineers as well, coming out of India, there are really well-established companies, really well-established pools of expertise. So the ability to produce extremely high-quality games inside India is already extant. Like everybody that you need to do it is already there. So I think there's a really interesting point in time right now where you've got a body of players who are catching up with the level of quality that that the teams that you have available to you can produce. So I think you're likely to see an explosion in the quality of games that are being put out, especially now since perhaps the appetite for them is growing. I also think one of the things that's spoken to in terms of maturity of players, the increase in raw numbers is a big deal. That's just having more Indians playing games is a really important step. But one of the things that that we're paying much more close attention to is less raw numbers than it is highly qualified users. So it's much more important to us to have a small number of people who really care about the game, who play a large amount, who bring their friends in, who spend money there. So like a smaller volume of highly enfranchised players is much more valuable than a giant volume of people that you can keep churning them through. So you can keep spending money on user acquisition. You can bring people in, but if there's lots of holes in the bathtub, it's not going to hold any water. So it's much more, we care very specifically about things like retention and player churn than we do just on raw numbers of bringing people in. And I think there's some really interesting developments to take place within the Indian market there as well.
So Dave, a question for you. You heard Sharon talking about numbers, both in terms of quantity. You heard him talking about some green shoots and an uptick on people willing to pay, and intention to purchase is even higher. What would you really look at if you were to take a decision to really open a game studio in India for India, an Indian IP?
The first thing I would tell you is don't ask me to open an Indian studio for Indians. That I am the last person that is qualified to make that decision. But in terms of the place that I don't in my role as an external development manager, if there are holes in what we're trying to do, places that I don't currently look to India for is game design. Now that could be my own ignorance. That could be that I just don't know who the really excellent Indian game devs are. But if somebody tells me they need amazing artwork or amazing models or an increasingly great engineers, people who really get the back end of the game, 100% we should be talking to really well-trained teams in India who can deliver at an extremely high standard. But if somebody's going to say to me, look, we need a new game mode, we need to break off a whole new piece of this where we have a single player game that needs a multiplayer component, go find an Indian studio who can do that at a AAA level. I don't currently know that exists. So either there's a gap in my research, a gap in India's marketing, or it doesn't exist. And I'm totally open to any of those things being true. But in my position as somebody who comes to India looking for expertise, I don't currently come there for devs. I absolutely come there for basically everything else that you need. And that may be where that hole is for, especially, an Indian-based, India-based team working with, Indian IPs. Like maybe there are phenomenal devs, but I don't know about it.
Sure.
I know Sam could probably speak to that too.
So Sam, I was coming to you. Microsoft, such large presence. I'm ex-Microsoft myself, and India has been some of the largest market or on the last frontier, if I may say, which you want to kind of conquer. And given the last 5-6 years where you've got first-party studios, do you think you would like to take a bet on making an Indian IPs and have an Indian studio?
I just can't say. I'm afraid I'm not in a position to say. Anything I would.
What if you were in a decision to say? What would you do?
Because very similar to David, I work with suppliers rather than full developers. So I don't know. I mean, absolutely everything is possible, and also I think one of the things that may open India up a little bit more from our side, again, looking at the console side, is looking at the way that we've changed, how we're changing how we play games. So one of the upticks, or one of the consequences, I think, from the pandemic, is that when the numbers come back down, as we start to come out of pandemic, we're going to come out of pandemic into a recession. And the value that video games have traditionally been quite recession-proof because they're actually very good value for money. You get many hours of play out of a small financial outlay. As we shift into things like, for us, the Game Pass, where we have subscription-based games and subscription-based service that we're looking at 100+ games for $10 a month. It also means that there is more room to maybe take a few more risks, and the drivers for financing them, the drivers for monetizing them, are slightly different than they would be from a traditional selling of a box product.
Sure.
So I think there's more room there. There may well even be more room to tailor towards specific regions as well. We'll have to see. If you look at Netflix isn't the same in India as it is in the UK, isn't the same in Brazil as it is in Germany. There are differences, there are culturalizations there. And that may act as a driver in the long term to opening up new areas such as India, maybe being a little bit more culturally tailored to those areas. Because again, I believe that as the recession hits, things like Game Pass will become very good value for money.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming back to Sharon, you do developer ecosystem evangelism, and Vikash, you are the developer, and you heard Sam and Dave talk about a possible design skill set gap. If you were to kind of really answer my question, that is the time right for us to really create a great MOBA around, let's say, Gangs of Wasseypur kind of an IP in gaming, right? Or one were to create a Mahabharata, like a Clash of Clans. What do you think is, Vikash, you would need to augment in your studio? And Sharon, in your experience, what do you think is lacking from somebody to really move forward with such ideas now, since the domestic market seems to be large enough to take those risks? Vikash, let's start with you. आप म्यूट पे हैं.
Yeah, sorry. So your question is regarding Mahabharat.
My question is regarding Gamation. Will Gamation really take those large funds, given that you have seen the most phenomenal success, and you said that Indian game, and now if you were to really move towards creating MOBA kind of games on Indian IPs or Indian mythologically IPs, take them into gaming, would you like to do it? If yes, if no, why not? If yes, what are the things which you're going to really add on?
You said a large fund. Manish?
Large fund nahi. I said that agar aapko karna hai, so what are the challenges and opportunities aapko dikh rahi hain in creating large games, high quality, high AAA games, which you need to do?
Yeah, so I think during this lockdown, we have learned regarding these time AAA games, as you said, or social gaming. We will mainly focus on social games, online multiplayer games, And yes, we are working on it. And in fact, we have 3-4 games. Those are in pipeline, and we are working on it. And Gemshan Technology or myself always want to create or make those
studios in India. And I'm speaking again from the mobile space, and that's the area I currently operate in. But like the other panelists said, you can find great talent across the board to create AAA components in India. And I think a lot of that work has been being done the last 15 years in our country, really. But when it comes to the core, which in my opinion is gameplay, game design, right? So game design, game mechanics, and then on top of that, to build a really successful game that would make a large IP like Mahabharata or an Indian IP successful, we would also need a really smart monetization layer for India to be built. There is a level of design thinking, and analytics and science, right, for gaming that is still, I think, in its early days in India. It's not like it doesn't exist. It's like the talent that does exist and is doing well in that space is in such demand that they're already being pulled into multiple directions. But that's an area where if a studio were to take a punt, I don't think the right way to look at it, in my opinion, is one studio take a punt, rather that a bunch of studios try to identify IPs that would appeal to Indian audiences across the board, maybe localized IPs or neutral IPs, and then try different variations. But each variation would have to have great game design. And the challenge would be to find enough solid game designers to not replicate an international model, but find some aspect of gameplay that resonates better with Indian audiences than international gameplay. Right? Now, where I've seen it work really well is some international companies that have worked in markets that are similar to China, like similar to India, like China, for example, where there are some aspects of us culturally that seems to click maybe in the way we like to spend or don't like to spend. Right? That seems to have done well with games like PUBG. But fundamentally, if you need big funds to be made, then you need to have a reasonable idea whether the investment would pay out. And for that, you need to have great monetization design. And for that, you need to have game design. That's the way I see the industry.
So Sam and Dave, clearly we seem to have an issue of the supply pool of the game design talent, and we are very young in terms of creating games or for our own product design. We have very few product companies, a lot of mature history of servicing companies, and all gaming product companies will have essential core as game design. How has US or Canada looked at solving the supply pool? What kind of courses, skills, programs which are available for the local ecosystem to really kind of get a method of a degree or a graduation or ecosystem partnership? Because that's something has been very important from a FICCI point of view of skilling, and how do we really create more ecosystem support to plug this gap and accelerate it rather than let it happen through its own process of discovery and each company trying to figure out and keep chipping at it. So there is something for us to learn from the ecosystem which has already been created, and how can we borrow from there? Sam?
I can speak to how we've seen it done in other countries, and it tends to have to come from the top. So the most successful strategies for dealing with this in countries tend to have to come from governmental organizations. If you look at Southeast Asia, and now Brazil is in a very similar position, there are powerful funded central government agencies that are encouraging the education sector, that are playing a part in being outward facing with the developers that are there and promoting them and pushing them outwards. And then inward facing in bringing in talent. So if we look at somewhere like, for example, Malaysia, where they actively encourage Western developers to come in and work with them to fill the gaps and give them experience in the areas where they don't have experience. They also work very heavily with the education sector in encouraging the kind of courses that are needed to be able to do that. There is quite a bit of one of the most interesting ones I saw, and it's almost a terrible thing to say, but you've got to waste some money. You've got to waste some money. You've got to blow some money. And you've got to make a bunch of mistakes before it kind of emerges, because it's a creative industry, and design is creative. You've got to have that kind of layer of freedom and chaos, the primordial kind of pool you need to be able to start to bring this kind of talent forward. I remember in Spain speaking to them. In Spain, they literally threw money at the problem. They gave free grants. The government gave free grants to developers that you didn't have to pay back, safe in the knowledge that they were never going to get them back. And there was a lot of failure. But if you now look at what's happening in Spain and the companies that are moving into Spain and the developers that are starting to emerge from Spain, as one of the, I think it was somebody at the university, when the university lecturer said, we need to fail. Yeah. And then once we've failed, we'll learn how to succeed. So that first wave, although nothing may have come out of it, what actually did come out of it was a bunch of people who got burnt, and a bunch of people who learned from their failures and learned from their mistakes, and those started the wave of designers and people given the freedom to take the risks to get there. So I don't know what strategy works, but what I have seen says you need government support. You need to be able to be prepared to take risks, fail, get back up, and on the second or third wave, your industry and your talent should start to emerge, and that's where you build. That's what I've seen elsewhere.
Do you like to teach? Because you're really, really beautiful words. Do you teach somewhere? Or are you a professor in your organization?
I was a very poor student. I have no education to speak of whatsoever.
It's beautiful words. Really, really nice. That you need to have some kind of freedom and chaos before you really kind of emerge something positive can emerge. Dave, sorry, over to you.
No, Sam's absolutely correct. Both that his words are beautiful and that I agree that there has to be room to fail, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be sort of esteeming failure. And I want to clarify something that I said earlier that is relevant at this point. I don't think that, to my knowledge, and again, this is pure just to my knowledge, there is AAA development expertise in like a deep way within India. However, that does not at all mean there are not AAA level, absolutely ass-kicking, amazing Indian devs. There's lots of them. They just don't live in India because anybody who really desperately wants to work on the sort of the AAA tier of gaming, that job opportunity doesn't exist in certain markets of the world. Right, and so then there's a reason why people congregate in California or in the West Coast or in where there are giant Microsoft studios, because the people who want to do those things are drawn to the places where it can be done. And to what Sam was saying earlier about sort of governmental support, of the ability to bring people back and say, like, if I have a dream of the kind of studio that I want to run, and I know there's an opportunity for me to do that. In India, there's sort of like there's the opportunity to go and start a studio and to inspire people and to build that talent up. Also, coming out of that sort of order and chaos side of things, there has to be the enough time for the people who were inspired to grow up and then get those skills. So I mean, we are like Super Mario Brothers came out the year I was born, or Donkey Kong came out the year I was born. So we're pushing 40 years deep into North American video game markets, whereas somebody who played a game thought that was really exciting. When I was a kid, it captured my imagination, and then I grew up, and then I figured out that I could actually do this for a living, and then I got that expertise, and now I actually do it. Like there's a long runway there where there's got to be those really super exciting Indian games, and maybe that's what's happening right now, is that lockdown, people are getting a chance to try out games and can see Indian games being made in India are fantastic, and then that inspires them to go then do it. But they need some time to grow up and get some money and get some expertise and grow those studios. So it's not an overnight solution, and but I do think it'll happen quickly, because if somebody does decide they want to make a AAA game in India, like with an Indian studio, Lord knows the content is there. They're going to have some amazing looking games, and they're built by some incredibly talented people, because the bench is there. It's literally just the studios are not at the AAA level. Again,
Yeah.
I'm so conscious of saying something grotesquely ignorant because of my narrow focus. I do not want to suggest that there isn't phenomenal game developers in India. I'm just saying that it seems like there's a space to mature on the AAA side. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. To your point, and I think it's such an important point. The kids who are playing games now, I am seeing in my own house, my younger one is learning online coding, and her favorite thing is to create games. And that's what she's doing. And because the thoughts and ideas and concepts are all coming from the variety of games she has played. She must have sampled at least some 40, 50 games in the last 100 days. And her mind is buzzing with the different ideas, and which she's very eager to implement that into small games and coding. But you're absolutely right. You fire the imagination, you enable that imagination to be channelized, and there you go. So that's what really happened. Just one thing which I wanted to kind of bring it back to Sam, you and Dave. Has COVID really brought a lot of efficiencies in your production, the way your game productions happen? Has it really kind of changed things, made it more efficient? And is there something new, technological innovations which have happened, which have really crashed the whole thing? I'm ignorant on that, and hence I would love to learn personally along with my audience. Sam?
So speaking from our side, short answer, no. There's not been necessarily, it's not been an efficiency thing, because making video games is a creative enterprise, and there is inherent advantage in having creatives in a room and having coders in a room problem solving. If you're not creative, you're problem solving. And there is an advantage in that. Now, I live and work in the external development world, and I passionately believe in it. So what I think has happened is that disciplines that we didn't think we could do outside of the office, we've now learned we can. There are two areas, so as I say, we can now leverage further experience. The other thing is that there's now empathy. So one of the challenges that Dave would have had as well is that when you're working with people in external teams, there can be a lack of understanding about how to work with them and the challenges of working with them, whether that is in feedback loops, whether that is in how they are part of the group and how they are part of the product and understanding the process. Now that everybody has that empathy, everybody has worked remotely, everybody knows what it feels like. So everybody understands the challenge. And so I think that alone will lead us down some interesting paths and open up some new ways of working and hopefully some new creative solutions to what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's the advantage.
Yeah.
Everything that Sam has said, I agree with. The only thing I would add is that because effectively everybody is remote working now, the communication is an even playing field. And so we've seen documentation of knowledge become much better, because as soon as you've lost the ability to just walk by somebody's desk and have a quick little side conversation, and the separate meeting that happens at the real meeting that happens after the meeting that everybody was in, that has gone away. And so now it's all on Slack, or it's all in those meetings in the room. And so by having everybody be remote, some things are absolutely lost, but at least it's all equal. And that has that's been a really striking change. I've noticed is just
this situation, hopefully the next few months.
Yeah, I think our ecosystem is amazing, from being a factory for hyper casual games. And I'm very happy that Crazy Labs has just partnered with two of my favorites in the industry. And that could really spur their own success can be now emulated by many, many, many developers. And that will usher in huge amount of confidence Because when you see that there is an acceptance and then you see a domestic market and you see readiness for somebody giving you little money to take risk, and I think that's the lovely cocktail, because the talent and passion was there. Now, if there is a slightly more runway for you to do it. Vikash, over to you. You wanted to say something.
Yeah, the Indian government has recently launched an initiative to boost creation of apps and tech in India. And this is certainly a step in right direction as compared to US and other countries. India has one of the largest skill shortage, and this is especially true in gaming.
Yeah, and gaming is one of the is one of the thing. Out of those eight things, government has identified gaming as one of the thing.
Only few proper gaming courses available in the market, especially those in the connect with industry and company needs. There are some courses available that teach certain programs. However, few that focuses on gaming as a whole. In US and Canada, they have bachelor and master level courses focusing on game development and game design. I would simply urge the Indian government to look into this sector. The gaming industry is big and would be a super huge in coming years.
Yeah, I think it is all of us becoming big and a lot of global companies coming to India and opening large studios, because it's directly a function of I can create skills, where will they get employed? Entrepreneur is a pyramid. So if you have a mass employment capability, I think that goes hand in hand. So while government and private have to come together both for skilling and employability, both point of view. So I think we have run out of time, and guys really enjoyed this conversation. If there's any last thoughts, otherwise we can wrap up this session.
I would just say perhaps the legacy of COVID for gaming in India is going to be the launching of 1,000 new great games. People have been exposed to that this is something they can do, and I look forward to seeing what happens.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. Before, if you're a game developer and you're watching this cast right now, you want some easy, quick resources. We at Google have put together a Play Academy that you can find online. Search for Play Academy. A lot of great resources on gaming specifically, on how to launch your game, how to build your game, and best practices. I hope that while we might not have bachelor's degrees in gaming in India, we definitely have these online resources that can help you boost the skills that you already have.
And if you don't understand, I'll give you Sharon's home address and phone number. All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you to the panel. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. We really look forward to the gaming industry becoming bigger than what it is, and India spearheading the gaming industry. Yeah. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start the next session in 5 minutes' time. Please stay tuned.